Dragon Ball Z games didn't just evolve randomly. Every era had that one title. The one that set the standard, shifted expectations, or quietly shaped everything that came after it. So instead of ranking every Dragon Ball Z game like usual and deciding on which one is best, this video is going to cover something a lot more specific. The single Dragon Ball Z game that defined each and every era. From the PS1 days to the PS2 golden age, to handhelds, to the HD consoles, and finally the modern era. These are the games that didn't just exist, they mattered. And this time of the year feels like a good place to pause and look back on how each DBZ game got us to where we are today. The PS1 era of Dragon Ball Z games was experimental, sometimes ambitious, sometimes rough, and often confusing. And while Ultimate Battle 22 is so far from perfect, it defined this era for me for one specific reason. It was the first Dragon Ball Z game that tried to feel like anime in motion. Full voice clips, large rosters for the time, fast movement, and actual attempts at spectacle. Was the combat janky? Fuck yeah. Were the hitboxes questionable? Absolutely. But this was the first time that a DBZ game leaned into presentation over just pure mechanic. Ultimate Battle 22 set the standard that DBZ games weren't just fighters. They were anime simulators in progress. And that very idea never went away. Because as soon as the PS2 console hit homes in America, the golden age of DBZ games began. And this one isn't really controversial. Or maybe it is. Budokai 3 didn't just define the PS2 era. It defined what people expect from a DBZ game to this day. Fast combat, skill-based movement, transformations that mattered, and a massive roster that felt distinct. This was the game where DBZ combat finally clicked. Not chaotic like Tenkaichi, controlled, deliberate, and rewarding. Budokai 3 proved that DBZ games could have depth without losing accessibility. It rewarded timing, key management, and execution. And even now when people talk about classic DBZ gameplay, they're usually describing Budokai 3's mechanics, whether they realize it or not. This was the foundation. And yes, before you say anything, Tenkaichi 3 is incredible. But Budokai 3 defined the era because it set the foundation. Tenkaichi expanded the spectacle, but Budokai 3 established the core combat philosophy that Dragon Ball Z games would expand on for years and years to come. And that brings us to what I call the handheld era. The handheld era of Dragon Ball Z games runs roughly from 2002 to 2006, the peak years of the Game Boy Advance, right before the PSP and the DS fully took over. This was the era where Dragon Ball Z games weren't trying to compete with consoles, they were trying to adapt. And no game represents that better than Legacy of Goku II. Instead of forcing arena fighters onto limited hardware, Legacy of Goku II leaned into what handhelds were actually good at. Longer play sessions, progression, and RPG style structure. You weren't just picking a character and fighting, you were playing through Dragon Ball Z. Leveling up, unlocking abilities, exploring the world, and switching between characters like Gohan, Vegeta, Piccolo, and Goku. This game defined the handheld era because it respected the platform. It understood that handheld DBZ didn't need spectacle, it just needed substance. Legacy of Goku II proved that Dragon Ball Z could work as more than a fighter on portable systems, and that idea shaped everything from future GBA titles to later handheld adaptations. It wasn't flashy, but it was complete. And for that era of handheld Dragon Ball Z games and perhaps anime games in general, nothing represents it quite like that. Next, we'll discuss the Tier 2 handheld era, which I consider the PSP/DS revolution. This is when the GBA started going out of style, the DS took over, and PlayStation wanted a piece of that cake for their own. And to be honest, even though my favorite of this era is Attack of the Saiyans, which is an absolutely amazing game, 1,000,000% recommend. For defining, I'm gonna have to go with the Shin Budokai games, both Shin Budokai and Shin Budokai Another Road. When Shin Budokai came out on PSP, PlayStation quietly said, yeah, I think we got this. This game didn't reinvent Budokai, but it certainly translated it. Fast combat, clean animation, real combat flow. For a handheld game, it had no right being this good. Shin Budokai defined the handheld era by proving something really important. DBZGames didn't need massive hardware to just feel right. They needed the right priorities. Moving on to the next era is what I call the HD PS3/Xbox 360 era. The HD era was awkward for DBZGames. New hardware, new expectations, a burst limit, as controversial as it is, stepped in as a transitioning stone. Was it perfect? Hell no. Small roster, short story, limited scope. But Burst Limit defined the HD era visually. This was the first DBZ game where animations truly felt anime accurate. Cinematic supers, dynamic camera work, dramatic clashes. Burst Limit shifted DBZGames toward presentation first design, and even though it stumbled, its influence is ever so obvious. Although Budokai 3 set that foundation, modern DBZ games arguably didn't evolve from it as directly as Burst Limit, because they evolved through it. It was the transitional stepping stone, the bridge. Now the modern era, it has a lot of candidates. Xenoverse changed customization. Kakarot was arguably the most in-depth rendition of the entirety of the Z story we've ever had. But when it comes down to it, FighterZ did something bigger. It legitimized Dragonballz as a competitive fighting game. For the first time, DBZ wasn't just about nostalgia, it was respected in the fighting game community. Tight mechanics, high skill ceiling, gorgeous visuals that still look insane years later. FighterZ redefined what a DBZ game could be in a modern gaming landscape. Not just fun, not just flashy, but genuinely well designed. And whether you like tag fighters or not, this game reshaped the conversation. When it comes down to it, every defining DBZ game, no matter what the era, understood one crucial thing. They captured how DBZ legitimately feels. Speed, momentum, power, escalation, impact, and graphics change. Hardware improves, mechanics evolve, but the games that endure are the ones that understood Dragon Ball first and built everything else around that concept. So honestly, when we talk about a game defining an era, it's important to clarify what that really means. It's not about sales numbers or even roster size. It's definitely not about which game people argue for the most in the comment sections, because trust me, if it was up to my favorites, the list would look a little different. Defining game is the one that answered the right question at the right time. Ultimate Battle 22 answered the question of whether Dragon Ball Z could even work as a fast, anime-style fighting game. Budokai 3 answered how deep and polished that formula could become. Legacy of Goku II proved DBZ could adapt beyond fighters on limited hardware, and Shin Budokai followed suit. Burst Limit showed what DBZ would look like in high definition, even if it stumbled along the way. And FighterZ proved that DBZ could stand alongside the most modern and best fighting games, not just as fan service, but as a serious title. And that's why some beloved games like Attack of the Saiyans don't necessarily define eras. They may perfect something, expand upon something, or even refine that something. But defining an era requires setting direction, not just delivering on that quality. Timing matters just as much as execution. The games that define eras aren't always the biggest or the most complete. They're the ones that changed and the ones that challenged expectations. They shift what fans think a Dragon Ball Z game should be and should appear to be. And once that shift happens, everything that follows it is actually responding to it. And that's the real legacy of the games on this list. Dragon Ball Z games didn't get here by accident. Each era left its mark, built its foundation, and kept pushing things forward. And looking back at these defining games feels like the best way to close things out that I could think of for 2025. Halfway through the decade, which, oh my god, dude. And that's not because the story's over, hopefully not even close, but it's to remember how we got here all these years later. Anyway, thank you all for watching this video. If you guys did enjoy, please make sure to leave a like below, comment on which of these games you've played, if you agree with my list of the defining era DBZ games, and of course, I hope you all have an amazing new year. I love you guys. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet, and stay safe, have fun. See you guys in 2026. Peace.